Hey guys! With this back routine, there are just a couple of rules. So rule number one, absolutely nothing should hurt. Sometimes things can feel a little bit like a nice pain, and that's okay. If your brain is telling you, oh, it's a little bit tender, but I like it, then that's your brain's way of saying this is probably doing me some good. If your brain is saying, I'm uneasy about this, or I'm not sure, or I feel unbalanced, or it just feels uncomfortable or just genuinely painful, then stop that movement immediately. Most back problems, if you actually have pain, there will be particular ranges that irritate it more than others. So you'll find that some movements through the whole routine are okay, and then others you just don't want to do. So just stop, have a little rest, have a little wriggle if something hurts, and then jump into the next movement if you feel okay with it. So rule number one, zero pain or zero bad pain. And rule number two is just go to a level of stretch and range that feels good for you. So everything that we're doing will be working along a spectrum. So you don't need to push as far as me, or you might be more flexible than me and you can push even further. Use me as a guide, but only go to a level that feels right for you. So rule number one, zero pain. Rule number two, just work to a level that feels right for you. And that should keep you nice and safe. But let's get started. When I'm stretching my back, I always like to start in a position with lots of support. So here we're just starting what we call a tabletop position, and we'll start with a gentle cat-cow. So the cat-cow starts with the chin tucking in, and then pushing the mid back up to the ceiling, and at the end tucking your tailbone under. And then we're going to reverse that by tucking the tailbone back down, pushing the belly towards the floor, and then looking forwards, and then chin tucked in. And keep reversing those movements. Start with the chin at the top. And then gently push back towards the child's pose. So your hips work towards your heels and you're pushing your hands further away. So you're trying to get as much distance between your hips and your hands as you can. Taking some nice belly breaths. I've chosen to have my knees slightly wider than my hips, and I find that this gets a nice stretch in the hips as well, especially when I integrate the breath. So we're going to go back into this tabletop, but this time, rather than do a more linear cat-cow, just start to scoop your back laterally and in rotation. So I often say, imagine there's a bowl around your back and you're trying to scoop your back through that bowl. And even then, imagine a bowl in front of your belly and you're trying to scoop your belly down and round in that bowl, swaying your hips a little bit, pushing your thorax out into the stretch and pushing your hips further forwards. Keep wriggling, integrating your shoulder blades. Wriggle those shoulder blades. Try and imagine your shoulder blades gliding over your thorax and pushing back a little bit halfway towards a child's pose, having a little wriggle around and still wriggling those shoulder blades over the thorax. And then back into a child's pose. But again, this time we're going to wriggle. So from this child's pose, take your hands and slide them over the floor in one direction. While your hand is over in this direction, push your hips in the opposite direction. So you're trying to lengthen the lats, open up that side of the thorax and lower back. Use your breath to expand your thorax out into the stretch. And then the other way, the other hand goes across, using the breath to expand the thorax. Great. One last little, I call this the crazy cat. So rather than a cat-cow, it's a crazy cat. One last little wriggle and stretch in this tabletop. Pushing your hips back, pushing your hips forwards. There are no rules with the crazy cat. Just wriggle, scoop your back and your shoulder blades and your hips. Okay, we're going to keep the idea of using some stability to begin with. So lay onto your back now. And just start with a simple knee hug, one knee, pulling the knee towards your chest. Use some belly breathing to help get into those deep connective tissues around the hip. And then keep a hold of this same knee, but loop the ankle over the opposite knee. And if you want to, you can lift that other leg up towards your chest as well. So now lifting both legs, getting a gentle glute stretch here. And then I've got my left knee close to my chest, so I'm going to use my right hand, the opposite hand, just to take that knee down towards the floor, trying to look up to the ceiling or even look over to the left hand. So I'm getting this counter rotation from pelvis to thorax. And just using gentle belly breathing to sink into the floor. Imagine your whole body just getting lower and lower. And then bringing that knee back just to a single leg knee hug. Let it rest down onto the floor. Just take a moment to see if there's a difference in how you feel now. One side might feel a bit more soft and relaxed and settling deeper into the floor. And then we'll go into the other side, hugging that knee towards your chest. Taking some belly breaths to connect to those deep connective tissues in the hip. And then resting the outside of that ankle over the opposite knee, pulling all that towards your chest. Getting that light glute stretch. And then taking the opposite hand across the knee, lowering the bottom leg and taking that knee across the body, trying to get the knee and the hands sinking towards the floor. Just using your breathing to help facilitate that. So nice deep belly breath, and on the out breath, sink a little bit lower to the floor. Cool, and then bring that knee back to a single leg knee hug. And just take a rest on the floor, sinking into the floor to see if that side now matches the other side. So roll back over onto your belly, and we're just going to go into a single leg kneeling position. So have a towel or a cushion to make sure your knee is comfortable. And I just need to move the camera so you can see what we'll do next. In this single leg kneeling position, we're going to start by tucking the pelvis under. So imagine your pelvis is a bowl of water and you're going to pour the water down the back leg. This is called pelvis posterior rotation, and that posterior rotation engages all the hip flexors. So here we're stretching the deep hip connective tissues at the front of the hips and lower back. So posterior rotation of the pelvis, and then whichever leg is on the floor, so I've got my right knee down on the floor, I'm going to use that right hand, same side hand as the back leg, to reach up and over. So the posterior rotation engages the hip flexors, and then the right hand really exaggerates it. So you lean over to the side away from the stretch. I'm just using a gentle pulse, so I'm going into the stretch and then back off. Into the stretch and then back off. If you find this really tricky for balance, do it next to a sofa or something so you can have your free hand out for balance, or you can just take that front foot a bit wider so you've got a wider base. You don't want to be wobbling all over the place while you're doing this. The focus should really be in the stretch, not the stability at the moment. And then from here, we'll just bring both knees back onto the towel, do a little child's pose. And then once you feel you've had a good wriggle, curl your toes under at the back. And we're going to go into a downward dog. So push your hips up into the air.
focus here is to have a straight back rather than a flexed back. So try and straighten your back. If you need your knees to be bent while you're doing this, then that's fine. It's better to have a straight back but bent knees than straight legs but a bent back. And then straighten one leg at a time just to get a nice little hamstring stretch. And then put the other knee down onto the floor and bring yourself nice and upright into the opposite side, single leg kneeling. And then whichever knee is down on the floor, that hand goes up into the air, reaches across, gently pulsing into that stretch, making sure that pelvis is posteriorly rotated to engage the tissues. And then sinking back down into the child's pose, have a little wriggle. And then curl the toes under, push the hips up into the air, and then straighten one leg at a time. So we're getting nice little hamstring and calf stretches, posterior chain stretches we'd call them. And then another little child's pose, another little crazy cat. It's just unsticking, using movement to wriggle and unstick all these deep connective tissues through the spine and the thorax and the hips. Good. From here, bring your feet into about hip width apart. And just forward bend. You'll notice my knees are bent here just so I can keep my hands resting on the floor. This is one of those movements where it may not be nice for all of you, so if this feels uncomfortable, just rest for a second and stand up. And here we'll just straighten one knee, straighten one knee. Just keep alternating the sides. We're getting a nice light little hamstring stretch. The other thing I like to do when in this forward bend position is imagine I'm holding a stick and just hold the stick between my legs, pointing one way, pointing the other way, pointing one way, pointing the other way, and this just brings a little bit more stretch through the lats. So when I'm holding that imaginary stick and it's the front hand where there's more of a stretch through the lats, you can really reach that front hand further down and out, reach that front hand down and out. Reach that front hand down and out. And then slowly, vertebra by vertebra, work your way all the way up to standing. Having worked all your way up to standing, we'll just take our hands out to the side and reach nice and high overhead, reaching high up into the sky. And then take the hands across to one side. So I always use the top hand reaching across and then normally just rest the other hand on my belly. Driving the hands and the hips in opposite directions. That top hand reaches away and across. My hips counterbalance towards the opposite side. We'll just do one more time each way. And then slowly back to middle. And taking both hands into a twist now. So we were just working the side bending. Now we're working rotation. This should be very loose. Let your hands and your wrists and your elbows be loose, twisting around your body. At the moment, I'm letting my head follow my hands. And that brings in a little bit more spinal rotation. Targets the hips a little bit more. We'll keep twisting, but just flexing forwards. So my hands are now going perpendicular to the floor pretty much. flexing forwards just really helps open up the lower back. Again, this should be not causing any pain at all. We'll just target the chest a bit more by turning the backhand, the palm, turn the palm to face up to the ceiling as you reach behind you. That shoulder external rotation just helps open up the chest a bit. And now we'll target the neck by looking forwards. So keep your head pretty still and move the body underneath the still-ish head, and this targets the neck. You can do that looking down as well. Don't know about you, but I hear a few little clicks and clunks, and as long as they're pain-free, that's a good thing. I always say clicking is unsticking. Cool, one last little wriggle and let the shoulders go. I'm just going to bounce up on my toes to help my shoulders hang and use a bit of gravity and momentum to unstick the shoulder blades. I'm doing that with my hands in front of me at the moment. And then my hands just at my side and slightly behind me. Open up the chest and the collarbone tissue. Really flicking the hands and the fingers and the wrists. And then maybe just one more forward bend and a little wriggle. Crazy cat style, no rules. Good, take a breath and hopefully you feel nice and energized. Should lift your energy a little bit, should feel light and loose through your movement, and I really hope that helped.